Hi everyone, I hope you're all doing well. Today we're taking a look at Firmament, and many thanks to the kind people over at Cyan Worlds for the key so I could play the game and review it. Now, if you don't know Cyan Worlds by name, maybe you've heard of a little puzzle game called Myst? Yes, okay, that's not so little really, it's a very big name in terms of puzzle games. Cyan are the team behind all of the Myst games, as well as Uru and Obduction, all very good games in their own right. Obduction I've actually played before on the channel. As the traditional masters of the puzzle genre, I was expecting great things of Firmament, and in that department at least I was not disappointed at all. The puzzles are, as ever, superb. The game was originally funded via Kickstarter back in 2018 with the intention of making a VR experience as well as a game to be played in Pancake Vision. Now, I played the game through in Pancake Vision, or traditional desktop mode shall we say, and have since taken the time to play some of the sections over in VR just to get a feel for it, and I'll talk about VR in its own section later in the video. However, I will say please dampen your expectations as it wasn't great. So I would just like to briefly make clear that everything I talk about from here to the VR section is relating to the desktop or Pancake Vision version, and while there is some overlap obviously of things like story, the focus of everything else is the desktop version. So let's talk about the game in a bit more detail. The story itself. Cyan's games always come with an interesting and out there story. Something to keep you guessing and wondering as you progress through the puzzles. Firmament is no exception, providing an interesting narrative with some twists and turns along the way, making you question exactly what your role is, and also that of your guide, ? Slight spoiler warning at this point, for very early in the story to be fair. You take on the role of a keeper, which seems to be a group of people who maintain the three worlds you can travel between. And you are woken and guided by a former keeper. She seems to be a ghost of some kind, and she will guide you and narrate the story throughout the game. I won't say any more, but there are plenty of hints and extra bits of story hidden around in the area, so keep your eyes peeled, and if you're interested, make sure you read everything. Okay, let's move on to the gameplay and what you can expect. Cyan do not mess around, they make puzzle games first and foremost. No half measures. Unlike the recent game Scorn, which was trying to be several things at once, Firmament is a puzzle title. Consider it an escape room on steroids. Aided by a special tool which can be upgraded throughout the game, you can complete more far-fetched and complex puzzles. Even if you are not a puzzle expert, eventual trial and error should lead you to a solution in most situations, though the most important thing in these games is a keen pair of eyes to spot what others may miss. Hidden buttons are not uncommon, but will stop you dead in your tracks at times if you miss them, as will missing a doorway. And yes, I'm speaking from experience. The game consists of 3 large open world areas and 1 main hub linked by portals, all with a slight steampunk feel. Technically speaking, you can approach these areas in any way you would like, only limited at certain points by requiring specific upgrades for your tool. The aim is to progress through each area, fulfilling the tasks gently gestured by the guide. I'm reluctant to go into too much detail for fear of spoiling any of the puzzles for viewers who may pick up the game, but suffice to say the puzzles are not an area the game will let you down. The only other thing I found was the game was much shorter than I expected, and your mileage will obviously vary depending on how good you are with puzzles and how familiar you are with Cyan's particular style of puzzles. The end felt quite abrupt, and I honestly thought it was a fake ending and that the game was going to continue. This was not the case sadly, but perhaps it leaves things open for a DLC or sequel. Sadly, one thing that has let the game down on launch is a significant amount of bugs. Some of them are game-breaking, and this is one of the reasons I've left it so long to post my review. I was literally holding off to see how many patches they would release, to see how much of an impact this was going to have. It honestly felt on release like the game had not been playtested well at all due to the massive number of players, including myself, suffering serious issues with various cranes in the game. Some people are having to restart their game over. The developers had even put in an option in settings to get unstuck, which teleported you to a safe place and reset some of these objects, which suggests knowledge of the issues but just releasing it without fixing them, and that is not ideal. Now, in fairness to Cyan, they have acted fast to release patches and try and fix or minimize these issues as much as possible, But once again, it's this pattern of companies, big or small, releasing games in a poor state and then apologising for it after the fact. I will note that while recording for this video itself, which is obviously quite a few weeks down the line, I still encountered another point where I managed to get myself stuck and soft locked and had to use the get unstuck option. So there are still issues. So while I very much enjoyed the game overall, I can't really do a review without pointing out these issues. Okay, moving on to the usual graphics and sound section. Again, this section relates specifically to the standard desktop game, not VR. So Cyan is a developer that never slouches when it comes to their game's very unique art styles. Each world has its own unique look with multiple areas there which have a distinct flavour. The game has many stunning vistas and I would expect nothing less from them, and honestly I found myself sometimes just standing and looking out over the horizon. Attention to detail around the worlds is superb, and I often found myself just walking around admiring the intricacies of the world they created. There are many posters, scrawled messages, paintings and other such things strewn around the place, and these left me often with more questions than answers, but you can be sure I stood and had a look at them. Sound is equally important in all of Cyan's games, and here it does not disappoint. The music is superb and perhaps subtly hints at the story behind the world more than I realised when first playing. If you don't get it when you first play, listen back to the music afterwards and you will get what I mean. Some areas also manage to maintain a very spooky atmosphere with clever use of background sounds mixed in over the music. Okay, let's move on to the VR experience, and I'm going to apologise straight away to Cyan here because you make amazing games, you really do, but I don't have much good to say about the VR experience here, so I'm apologising in advance, but I've got to be honest. So, having been looking forward to seeing this in VR, I was disappointed to find that on PC with my original HTC Vive, it was not a good experience at all. It almost felt like VR was a tagged on afterthought. Unfortunately, very little in the game is actually interactable in VR. The only thing you can pick up, in quotation marks, in the world were the books, and there aren't very many of these. Many of them are just repeats. The only other time I really used my hands was to climb a ladder, and while going up is fine, going down is so awkward. I actually switched on the instant ladder travel, which is an option in settings. Unfortunately, there's only one setting for this, and it literally just teleports you to the top or to the bottom, and this completely takes away from the immersion of the game. I honestly kind of wish it was just the same as the desktop version when you turn this on, and it just climbed it for you, so you weren't just snapping up to the top of the ladder or the bottom. Now, don't get me wrong, I've played games where you climb up and down ladders by, dragging your hands up and down, but it just didn't seem to work very well here. And as I note, while you hardly use your hands, every time you want to pull out your adjunct, aka the tool you use to open and move things, you have to pull it out by grabbing it as you would be a pistol on your belt in other games, for example. And again, it feels very tagged on for VR. It's not a fun addition. I would have much preferred if it was just there in my hand all the time. Sadly, there's no setting for this. It just feels like an extra bit of hassle in VR to grab it out every time I want to use it, and for the amount that you use it, it may as well just always be in your hand. Graphically, it felt a lot less stable in VR. I got juddering at times and also found catching or touching the touchpads while in the menus would make everything go blurry briefly, and the controls overall were fiddly at best and a frustration at worst. Even clicking on things in the menu was sometimes unresponsive, and when it did work, I required an extended hold of the trigger button to get it to respond. And I will also note that while using the pods to travel in VR, it locks you in place and takes you to a loading screen. It does not leave you in the pod, which doesn't happen outside of VR, and again is kind of immersion breaking, which is the last thing you want to happen when you're in VR. Now, Cyan are known for making amazing looking games, but it massively lost something in VR here. Now, granted, I have an original Vive, so the screens are not as good as some of the modern offerings, but even so, it looked particularly bad in VR. And somehow the spires that are part of the maps really lost their massive sense of scale in VR, and they just didn't look as imposing. Now, honestly, the worst thing by far in VR was actually the movement. It is insanely fast. Now, I play VR with free turn on rather than the whole set amount of degrees at a time, as I find the fixed degree turn very unpleasant. However, I've never found a game spins me about so much or so fast with just a very brief touch of the thumb pad, and it was not a good experience. Honestly, if this was a VR-only title, I would actually give it quite a negative review score, and I would probably advise avoiding it in VR on PC. I can't speak for how it plays elsewhere in VR, but I think you lose a lot more than you gain switching over to VR here, and genuinely, I was very disappointed with that. And again, I am sorry to Cyan because Firmament was a great game overall, but sadly I really struggled to find good things to say about the VR experience. Okay, let's have a summary and my final thoughts on the game. Again, this is about the standard desktop version and not the VR experience. We've already discussed that just now. So Firmament is exactly what it's supposed to be, a superb puzzle game, and if like me you like a good head scratcher, then it's certainly one for you. From its impressive worlds and music to its intriguing story, there is plenty to enjoy outside of the standard puzzle antics. Like I say, you will find yourself sometimes just admiring the world. Sadly, it's not been a rosy launch for the game. It has been marred by bugs, some of which most certainly should have been caught during QA testing. But credit to Cyan for even putting out patches on a weekend in a scramble to fix things. But it's really a shame that there needed to be a scramble. The game lasted me about 5 or 6 hours in playtime, less than I expected, but your mileage will vary depending on how experienced or good you are at puzzles. Sadly, its replayability is obviously severely limited due to once you've finished it, you know the puzzles already. The current asking price on Steam is $29.50, and I'll leave it to you to decide if that's a good price for that many hours of gameplay. As I say, it may take you longer to complete. I feel it is a little steep and perhaps the £20 mark would have been more appropriate. Overall, if the game had released in a better state and was a few more hours in length, I would have given the game the coveted 5 out of 5 for the desktop version. However, its cost versus relatively short playtime and its significant bugs at launch, I will have to downgrade that to 4 out of 5, because the truth is, had I paid full price for the game, I know I would have actually come away disappointed. And that's where I leave it. On the one hand, as ever, it's an incredible puzzle experience with a fascinating world and story, but on the other hand, it's not without its issues. I will note that I expect them to continue to work hard to fix all of the bugs, so I wouldn't let that put you off buying the game, and honestly, I only had one occurrence of this during my main playthrough, and I got over it very quickly and then never had any more issues. Has anyone else played the game? What did you think? Did you get stuck by any of the bugs? Let me know in the comments down below. Also, let me know if you tried the VR experience and how you found that. As always, please do like, share, subscribe, and thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned to the channel for more reviews.